June 4, 1942, 4:20 a.m. The dark Pacific Ocean stretches endlessly beneath a pale gray dawn, nearly 1,300 miles northwest of Hawaii, near the lonely coral atoll known as Midway Atoll. Wind whistles across the deck of the American carrier USS Enterprise, CV-6. Mechanics crouch over engines. Pilots climb into cockpits, breath fogging the cold morning air. Propellers begin to spin. Across the sea, far beyond the horizon, a massive Japanese strike force approaches, four of the most powerful aircraft carriers ever assembled. On the flagship of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in Pearl Harbor, one man has already made the decision that will determine whether these American pilots live or die. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz. And his decision was a gamble. Not a small one. A gamble based on fragments of intercepted radio messages, cryptic code groups, and the work of a handful of exhausted intelligence officers working in a cramped basement known simply as Station HYPO. If they were right, the Japanese fleet would sail straight into an American trap. If they were wrong, the United States would lose its last operational carriers in the Pacific. Just 6 months earlier, the Imperial Japanese Navy had shattered American confidence at the attack on Pearl Harbor. 4 battleships sunk, hundreds of aircraft destroyed, the Pacific Fleet crippled. But one critical group of ships had not been in harbor that day. America's aircraft carriers. Those carriers now represented the entire future of the war in the Pacific. And the Japanese knew it. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, mastermind of Pearl Harbor, was preparing his next move, an operation designed to lure those American carriers into one final, decisive battle. His target, the small, strategic outpost of Midway. What Yamamoto did not know was that American codebreakers were already reading parts of his secret plan. In a dim intelligence office beneath Pearl Harbor, Commander Joseph Rushford and his team worked around the clock decoding the Japanese naval cipher Gen 25. The messages kept mentioning a mysterious objective labeled only AF. Rushford believed AF meant Midway, but the Navy command in Washington wasn't convinced. So Rushford proposed a risky test. Midway would transmit an uncoded message claiming its freshwater plant had broken down. 2 days later, Japanese intercepts reported, AF is short on water. The codebreakers had their answer. Midway was the target, and Admiral Nimitz now had a choice that would shape the war. He could retreat and preserve his carriers, or he could set the trap. Nimitz chose the trap. Within days, the carriers USS Enterprise, CV-6, USS Hornet, CV-8, and the battered but hastily repaired USS Yorktown, CV-5, slipped quietly out of Pearl Harbor. Their orders were simple. Hide northeast of Midway. Wait for the Japanese fleet. And when the moment came, strike first. But there was one terrifying problem. The Japanese weren't bringing 1 or 2 carriers. They were bringing 4 of the most elite carriers in the Imperial Navy, ships that had already helped conquer half the Pacific. And their air crews were the best in the world. As the sun begins to rise over the Pacific on June 4th, American pilots prepare to launch into the unknown. None of them know yet that within the next 5 hours, one of the most devastating naval disasters in Japanese history will unfold. And it will all begin with a single sighting report. June 4th, 1942, 4:30 a.m. Far to the northwest of Midway Atoll, the heart of the Japanese attack force cuts through the Pacific swells. At the center of the formation sails the massive carrier Akagi, flagship of Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo. Around her move the other pillars of Japan's elite carrier fleet, Kaga, Tsuryu, and Hiryu. Together, these 4 carriers formed the same striking force that had devastated the U.S. Navy during the attack on Pearl Harbor. Their decks are already alive with activity. Flight crews rush across steel surfaces. Bomb carts rattle across the deck. Mechanics tighten engine panels while pilots strap into cockpits. Within minutes, dozens of aircraft roar to life. Dive bombers, torpedo bombers, fighters. At 4:30, Nagumo gives the order. Launch the first strike. One by one, aircraft surge down the carrier decks and leap into the gray morning sky, climbing toward Midway. More than 100 Japanese aircraft are now heading directly toward the island. Their mission, destroy the American airfields and defenses before the invasion force arrives. From the bridge of Akagi, Nagumo watches the aircraft disappear into the distance. He believes the American carriers are nowhere nearby. Japanese reconnaissance had reported no enemy fleet in the area. To Nagumo, the operation appears to be unfolding exactly as planned. But what he cannot see, hidden beyond the horizon, 3 American carriers are already waiting. Back on the island of Midway Atoll, the early morning silence suddenly shatters. Radar operators spot incoming aircraft. Moments later, the first Japanese bombers appear over the horizon. Sirens scream across the island. American pilots scramble toward their aircraft. Among them are outdated Brewster F-2A Buffalo fighters and rugged Grumman F-4F Wildcat interceptors. They roar into the sky to meet the attack. The battle above Midway begins instantly and violently. Japanese Zero fighters slash through the American defenses with deadly precision. Bombs fall across the island. Fuel tanks erupt in flames. Anti-aircraft guns thunder from the ground. But despite the damage, something important survives. The airfield is not destroyed. Runways remain usable. American bombers are still able to launch. And within minutes, waves of U.S. aircraft begin taking off, not toward safety, but toward the Japanese fleet itself. The pilots flying these missions know the odds are terrible. Many of their planes are slow. Some are barely combat ready. But they launch anyway, because somewhere out in the vast Pacific, the Japanese carriers must be found. And if the Americans fail to locate them first, Vice Admiral Nagumo will launch a second strike that could wipe Midway off the map. What Nagumo doesn't know yet is that the real threat isn't coming from the island. It's already flying toward him. June 4th, 1942. 6 a.m. The Pacific sky above Midway Atoll is already filled with aircraft. American bombers climb slowly through scattered clouds, engines straining as they push eastward over the endless ocean. Below them, the water stretches in every direction, featureless, empty, and unforgiving. Somewhere out there are the Japanese carriers. But the ocean is vast, and time is running out. From the deck of USS Enterprise, CV-6, squadrons of Douglas SPD Dauntless aircraft lift into the morning sky. Nearby, aircraft launch from USS Hornet, CV-8, and the recently repaired USS Yorktown, CV-5. Together they form a scattered search pattern across hundreds of miles of ocean. Each pilot knows the stakes. If they fail to find the enemy carriers soon, the Japanese strike aircraft will return from Midway, refuel, rearm, and launch again, this time with orders to destroy the American fleet. Meanwhile, aboard the Japanese flagship Akagi, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo receives the first reports from the Midway attack force. The message is troubling. Midway is still operational. The island's defenses were damaged, but not destroyed. The strike leader requests permission for a second attack. Nagumo faces an immediate dilemma. His reserve aircraft are currently armed with torpedoes, perfect for attacking ships. But if Midway needs another strike, those planes will need to be rearmed with bombs instead. He hesitates only briefly before issuing the order. Rearm the reserve aircraft for a second strike on Midway. Below deck, the hangar crews begin the dangerous process of switching weapons. Torpedoes are rolled away. Bomb racks are installed. Fuel hoses snake across the hangar deck. Aircraft are packed wingtip to wingtip. The carriers' hangars are now crowded with fully fueled, partially armed aircraft. It is a volatile situation. One spark could turn the hangar into an inferno. But Nagumo believes he still has time, because his scouts have reported no American carriers nearby. Then, at 7:28 a.m., a delayed reconnaissance message finally reaches the bridge of Akagi. One of the Japanese scout planes reports 10 enemy ships. Nagumo's officers freeze. Enemy ships? Could American carriers be nearby after all? Nagumo immediately reverses his earlier order. The reserve strike aircraft must now be rearmed again, this time back to torpedoes for attacking ships. The hangar decks descend into chaos. Bombs are being removed. Torpedoes rolled back. Fuel lines still connected. Aircraft shuffled across crowded decks. The Japanese carriers are now in the worst possible state. Aircraft fully fueled. Weapons scattered everywhere. And crews rushing frantically to prepare a strike. At that exact moment, The first American attack planes are already approaching. June 4, 1942, 9:18 a.m. Low over the Pacific waves, a slow formation of American torpedo bombers pushes forward through the humid morning air. These are Douglas TBD Devastator aircraft, obsolete, underpowered, and painfully slow compared to Japanese fighters. Leading one of the groups is Lieutenant Commander John C. Waldron, commander of Torpedo Squadron 8 from USS Hornet, CV-8. Waldron had argued earlier that their course was wrong. Now, trusting his instincts, he breaks formation and turns his squadron toward where he believes the Japanese fleet must be. Moments later, through the haze on the horizon, they see them. Four enormous aircraft carriers cutting through the sea. Akagi, Kaga, Sarayu, Hiryu, the heart of the Japanese fleet. Waldron's voice comes over the radio. All planes attack. The Devastators descend toward the water, lining up for their torpedo runs. But the Japanese fleet has already seen them. Within seconds, the sky fills with the sleek fighters of the Mitsubishi A6M0. The Zeros dive like hawks. Machine guns rip through the slow American bombers. One Devastator explodes into flames. Another spirals into the sea. Then another. The torpedo planes press forward anyway. Pilots fly straight toward the carriers through a storm of anti-aircraft fire. But the Devastators are too slow, too exposed. One by one they are shot down. Of the 15 aircraft in Waldron's squadron, every single one is destroyed. Only one man survives. Ensign George H. Gay Jr. His burning plane crashes into the ocean. Gay inflates his life vest and floats in the water, directly beside the Japanese fleet. From the waves, he watches the battle unfold. More American torpedo squadrons soon arrive. Aircraft from USS Enterprise, CV-6, and USS Yorktown, CV-5, attack next. They suffer the same fate. Japanese fighters tear through them mercilessly. Dozens of Devastators fall into the sea. Not a single torpedo hits its target. The attack is a disaster. Yet something critical has just happened. The Japanese Zero fighters have been pulled down to low altitude, chasing the torpedo bombers across the waves. The carrier decks are still crowded with aircraft. Fuel lines remain connected. Bombs and torpedoes lie scattered across the hangar floors. And the Japanese fleet's attention is now fixed entirely on the low-flying attackers. High above the battlefield, unseen in the bright morning sun, a new group of American aircraft is arriving. And within the next 5 minutes, the course of the Pacific War will change forever. June 4, 1942, 10:20 a.m. High above the battle, nearly 20,000 feet over the Pacific, a formation of American Douglas SPD Dauntless aircraft searches the empty ocean. Fuel gauges are dropping. Pilots are beginning to worry they may have missed the Japanese fleet entirely. Leading one of the groups is Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey from USS Enterprise, CV-6. McCluskey has a choice to make. Turn back and save what fuel remains, or gamble everything on a final search. He chooses the gamble. Scanning the water below, McCluskey suddenly notices something unusual. A lone Japanese destroyer racing across the ocean at full speed. It is Arashi, rushing to rejoin the main fleet after attacking an American submarine. McCluskey realizes what that wake means. The destroyer must be heading back to the carriers. He turns his entire formation to follow it. Minutes later, the clouds break, and suddenly the Japanese fleet appears below them. 4 massive carriers sailing in formation, their decks crowded with aircraft. Fuel hoses snaking across hangars. Bombs and torpedoes stacked nearby. The worst possible moment for an air attack. McCluskey's voice cracks across the radio. Attack! The dauntless dive bombers roll over into near-vertical dives. Air brakes scream open. The ocean rushes upward at terrifying speed. Below them, the Japanese carriers are caught completely off guard. Anti-aircraft guns begin firing wildly. But it's already too late. The first group dives toward Kaga. Bombs fall. 1, 2, 3 devastating hits. Explosions rip across the flight deck. Fuel lines ignite instantly. Within seconds, Kaga is engulfed in towering flames. Another group dives toward the flagship Akagi. One perfectly placed bomb smashes through the flight deck and detonates in the hangar below. Aircraft packed with fuel and explosives erupt in a chain reaction. Firestorms race through the carrier. The flagship of the Japanese fleet is now mortally wounded. A third wave plunges toward Sarayu. Multiple bombs slam into the deck. Explosions tear through the hangars. Within minutes, Sarayu 2 becomes a blazing wreck. In less than 5 minutes, 3 of Japan's most powerful aircraft carriers are burning uncontrollably. Smoke columns rise thousands of feet into the sky. From the ocean below, Ensign George H. Gay Jr., floating among the wreckage of his torpedo squadron, watches in disbelief. The carriers that had dominated the Pacific for 6 months are being destroyed before his eyes. But one carrier still remains untouched. Farther north, Hiryu has escaped the initial attack, and its air group is already preparing to strike back. The battle is far from over.